So my brother's a priest, and we all like to say grace before we eat, put a blessing over our food. Well, this is legitimate. Holy guacamole. What do you mean it's inappropriate to do a public presentation without a shirt? All right, let's fix that. Slightly better. But, of course, the word Satan might offend some people. Suppose we'll have to deal with it. All right, so what is autism? Well, there's a couple reasons for the inspiration in this video. One, hi, I'm Kevin Chaos. I have autism. Asperger's to be specific, which is a high-functioning autism, of which we're about to explain what exactly that means. The second reason is that on the internet, where insulting behind the safety of a keyboard is very popular, words get tossed around a lot. Remember the swear word warning. Fag is often an insult used on the internet, and it doesn't mean, in the context used, necessarily a gay person or any of the actual definitions. Instead, it's used like a suffix, like hyphen, fag, to the end of anything that you don't like. If someone is into anime and you're not, then the insult to use is anime fag. Someone draws and you think that's stupid, they're a draw fag, etc., and so on. A sports fag. That having been said, nowadays that word's definition has been tweaked even further. Naturally, there are lots of groups and things that aim to make all this stuff inappropriate. Well, there isn't that many groups defending the autistic people, and the new word to use seems to be autist. So now anytime you don't like someone or something that someone produces or says online, they're an autist. Just immediately belittle their intelligence. But here's the thing, folks. Are autistic people stupid? Maybe simply just highlighting what autistic really is, outside the realm of those trolls, can inspire people to have a more open mind, instead of seeing through the lens so limited by hatred or this predefined notion of stupidity. So, what is autism? I'd like to also, before we begin, give a special thanks to a company called Buzzin and their program called iMindMap. It's an absolutely wonderful program, by the way. I don't get any kind of sponsorship. I'm completely unaffiliated, and there's no money being made off of mentioning them. I just believe in credit where credit is due, and I'm extremely thankful for the tools they provided for many years. I'm a fan from way back, since version 4, I think it was, and they've only continued to amplify and add magnificent features ever since. What is this program, iMindMap? This program, which you're about to see here in a second, is like a Venn diagram or a word web that you might remember as a kid, drawing out little branches of different ideas on steroids. You can add pictures, you can add video clips. I mean, the way that you can use this program is practically infinite. You can customize the colors of every branch and bar. Okay, well, I use that tool to make us a little map here. Let me know if you're interested, and I will put a link to this document. And it's going to make it very easy to kind of stream flow this thought on what is Asperger's. Kerchuk. All right, so we have what is autism here as this central thought. Kerpow. What is autism? I mean, look at this, folks. Isn't this program absolutely... Look, you'd be surprised how quick and easy that was to do. Central idea. All right, now scrabbled autism here. So we'll start with what the DSM-5 defines autism as. I think that's right. All right. Kerchunk. These are common traits of Asperger's, and you have to meet so many, I think it's 2, criteria here. So this is what it is to have Asperger's. persistent deficits in social communication and social interactions, absence of interest in peers or friends, difficulty adjusting behaviors to suit various social contexts, difficulty in sharing imaginative play, abnormal social approach, deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships, restricted patterns of behavior, interests, or activities as manifested by two of the following. Stereotyped or repetitive motor movements. Right? What is that? Lining up toys, flipping objects, flip cup with a little coffee creamer. Echolalia. I made sure to define this because I'm sure a lot of you aren't familiar with the term. We're not all doctors and whatnot. Echolalia, meaningless repetition of speech or mimicry, impressions, mirroring like a child learning to talk. Okay, this may include all kinds of sorts of things. So finger ticking, you see that popular among schizophrenics, for example. That's a form of echolalia. Or making compulsory noises with their mouth that aren't necessarily relevant or needed. There's ticking of the tongue, bird whistles, etc. Compulsive mannerisms like that. Okay. Idiosyncratic, individual or peculiar patterns of speech. Okay. A unique way of talking, let's say. Right? Because, of course, we're going to cover this as well. They minimalize social interaction. And that's going to come with so many other traits of Asperger's, actually, with a unique sort of direct form of speech. Insistence on sameness, inflexibility. All right. Adherence of patterns and routines, ritualized patterns in verbal and nonverbal behavior. Extreme distress at small changes. Anxiety much? Difficulties with transitions and deviations. Remember, patterns. Rigid thinking patterns and greeting rituals. Routinely needing to take the same travel route or eat the same foods daily. Now keep in mind, one not necessarily need to have every trait on this list. But generally speaking, you're going to probably have more than one if you have Asperger's at home. They experience very strong attachments. Very strong attachments. Oops. Fixated interests that are often outside of the norm. Okay, like Fox Mulder, that fictional character on X-Files, probably autistic. His choice and area of study is the occult and things that are strange. Autistic people in fetishism, for example, might like feed or something because it's abnormal. Or might have a small fetish or a large fetish. Abnormal. Fixation on things that are outside the norm. It applies to many things. That's how their brains more often operate. Preoccupation with unusual objects. And there's several reasons for that as well. We'll break that down a little bit here. Hypersensitive. Hyperactivity or hypoactivity to sensory input. For me, for example, I'm extremely sensitive to sound. I'm extremely sensitive to sunlight. It feels like I'm actually on fire. It's an entirely different experience. And I haven't been diagnosed with, but in my family does run lupus and fibromyalgia. Hypoactivity to sensory input. Excessive smelling or touching of objects. A lot of occultists might have Asperger's traits as well. Constantly ticking, constantly mentally, compulsorily messing with abstract things to maintain, in a way, that level of trance, that non-linear sort of way that they handle things. Visual fascination with lights or movements. That one's especially true for me. My brother practicing martial arts or any kind of yoga or anything near me, it kind of disturbs me. Not that I don't like doing those things, but I actually feel almost as if you're doing those things through me. Every movement, I kind of feel that wave. That extreme sensitivity to external stimuli. Now, for some of us, this is a light part of the brain. Like they might like to watch running water and stare at its reflection, or fidget spinners. It's less about the spin and more about the reflection of the light on the device. and kind of just gazing into this fascinating little small strange thing. Adverse response to specific sounds or textures. Again, I mentioned sounds being particularly sensitive. It also comes with insomnia for me, which doubles that how sensitive sounds and lights and things affect the mind. See how quickly we covered so much of that material? Isn't that incredible? I mind map by buzzing. I say it like that because originally when I saw a tutorial advertising this program before getting it for myself years ago, it had like an animated character with an English accent. When visual avatars were first becoming popular and looking pretty realistic with their 3D graphics and whatnot. All right, so there's further definition from the DSM to categorize autism now into 3 different levels. And we're going to go over those here. All right. Level 1, requiring support. Without supports in place, deficits in social communication cause noticeable impairments, difficulty initiating social interactions, and clear examples of atypical or unsuccessful response to social overture of others. May appear to have decreased interest in social interactions. For example, a person who is able to speak in full sentences and engages in communication, but whose to and fro conversation with others fails, and whose attempts to make friends are odd and typically unsuccessful. Now, some of those things I relate to myself, particularly balancing speaking and listening. I'm very knowledgeable. I'm very quick to kind of try to get to the exit point. Small talk is not a strong suit. Inflexibility, level 1. Inflexibility of behavior causes significant interference with functioning in one or more contexts. Difficulty switching between activities. Problems of organization and planning hamper independence. Made a couple typos on this document. Level 2. Requiring substantial support. Inflexibility of behavior, difficulty coping with change, and or other restricted repetitive behaviors appear frequently enough to be obvious to the casual observer and interfere with functioning in a variety of contexts, distress and or difficulty changing focus or attention. Now, for me, anxiety is the biggest scope of that, and the verbal barrier are the 2 biggest difficulties for me with Asperger's. Requiring substantial support in level 2 means marked deficits in verbal and nonverbal communication skills, social impairments, apparent even with supports in place, limited initiation of social interactions, and reduced or abnormal responses to social overtures from others. For example, a person who speaks simple sentences, whose interaction is limited to narrow special interests, and has markedly odd nonverbal communication. I once had a guy who sounded exactly like Vin Diesel, looked a lot like him too, was incredible, but wasn't him, and said, "No offense, Kevin," upon meeting me after a few hours, "but you're strange." And he meant it in a totally complimentary way. Like, people enjoy the strangeness, the quirkiness, as it will. It's not necessarily always a barrier, but it is noticeably different. Level 3. Level 3 attained. Requiring very substantial support. Dun 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 dun. Inflexibility of behavior. Extreme difficulty coping with change or other restricted and repetitive behaviors that markedly interfere with functioning in all spheres. Great distress. Difficulty changing focus or attention. Severe deficits in verbal and nonverbal communication skills cause severe impairments in functioning, very limited initiation of social interactions, and minimal response to social overtures from others. For example, a person with few words of intelligible speech who rarely initiates interaction, and, when he or she does, makes unusual approaches to meet needs and responds only to very direct social approaches. That's extremely true for me. If I take the time to try to translate, just like you, with me being different to you, I can get there. But ultimately, for the fastest, most straightforward approach, direct is the way to go. But people use sarcasm and rhetoric and humor and all these extra steps I prefer the direct logical approach. It's a lot easier for me and everyone else, I would think. So those are the 3 levels of Asperger's, of autism, according to the DSM-5, the Drugs and Statistics Manual, 5th edition. They add, symptoms must be present in early development period, but may not fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities or may be masked by learned strategies later in life. Symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. Okay, now we're going to hear my dumbed down version of what autism is. What is it? The personal view. A persistent developmental disorder that creates barriers in social life with difficulties including but not limited to verbal language, body language, and tonal cues. People with Asperger syndrome are often are primarily antisocial and have 1 to 3 genuine interests that are hyper-focused or fixated upon obsessively and to the exclusion of all else. Dietary needs or hygiene may be difficult for some people with Asperger syndrome to manage due to this level of hyper-focusing. Asperger's often comes with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and ADD or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It is said that they often have difficulty in understanding what is socially acceptable. And I'm like 50-50 on the last part of that, though, even though this is my own speecher. That we have difficulty understanding. Some people might be 100% blind to what is socially acceptable. But for super technical Asperger's mind, the way we use those kind of words, acceptable is bizarre. What do you mean acceptable? You mean like wearing a certain outfit to go to church, dressing up or down for dinner? That is strange extra steps, technically. So what is socially acceptable versus I disagree or I like my way more might be how an autistic mind might see it. I don't think everyone is just 100% blind to it, but I think that it's more of a personal lifestyle. Hence, many autistic people coming off as kind of childish, but much more freer and happier in a sense, despite the anxiety interruptions. I should have mentioned that this could often come with bipolar as well, because it's going to be interpreted that mania, that extreme childlike he, and then the switch to anxiety and panic under sudden circumstances. To the casual observer that doesn't know that there's specific triggers and shit like that, excuse me, I did give a trigger warning on the swearing, but to a person who wouldn't know that, it seems like they just flip from here to here. They don't know that there's all these ways that this person's mind and chemistry is uniquely affected, like the lights and sounds and etc., that might make that anxiety so big. So it's often misdiagnosed with mood disorders and those things instead of just immediately understanding this. I was lucky enough as a child to get this Dr. Espinosa Guanz on, who had family and recognized this illness pretty quickly, when everybody else, until I had her, didn't really know what to make of it. All right, so we have pros and cons here, and famous autistic people. Let's go over the famous autistic people. Dun, 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 dun. Famous Aspies. So we have 2 categories here. One is official. It's confirmed they're diagnosed. The other is suspected, exhibiting traits of Asperger's or self-diagnosed. Ding. So first, let's go with the suspected people or self-diagnosed autistic people. And I find this extremely fascinating. I wanted to go back and put this in caps, certain people, but didn't. And I'll explain. The parts I was going to put in caps, I was going to call out there people. And whether direct intelligence or abstract and imaginative intelligence like philosophy and science and such, there are some people that really stand out on this list as sort of out there thinkers. And I missed one. Albert Einstein is supposed to be on this list here. I also try to put them in alphabetical order. So Albert Einstein To quote him, actually, out of all the things I've learned, I learned the most when I wasn't in my right mind, which most people are never going to understand what that means now. But since I'm autistic, let me break it down for you. It's a multi-layered explanation. The right mind, left brain, imagination, creativity, yada. Also, he did a lot of mind-expanding drugs. Now, if you learn non-linear and from a sort of abstract sort of place, then you learn things not in your right mind. It's not considered right or correct in how to approach things. People with ADHD are called nonlinear thinkers. But it doesn't mean they don't necessarily get toward the exit with an abundance of extra information attached. Okay, so Albert Einstein. Of course, I don't like quoting them too much because, as we should all know by now, Albert Einstein was found to be a fraud. Over 90% of his works, including the theory of relativity, was stolen. Just YouTube search Albert Einstein is a fraud exposed, and you'll get this chunky Buddha-like guy that is just awesome, laying it out for you in about 13 minutes. And you can research all the terms and references yourself. But it's pretty incredible. Albert Einstein is one of the biggest frauds to ever exist, and we still kind of report it as if it's fact. Nevertheless, this quirky fella helped create compilations of stuff for you to know. He may have had autism, and that was a direct quote that he kind of just hodgepodge his shit together. And I also think that quote kind of tells you, there was another one, but I don't have the direct quote and I don't want to butcher it, that to me said, without saying, that he's a great borrower of information. Why work hard when you can work smart, kind of thing. All right, next we have Bill Gates. That's another out there thinker, right? Out there. Bill Gates. And we know who Bill Gates is. Machine mastermind. Computers. Guy's a genius. Alright. Bill Gates out there. Look how much money he's made. And yet, probably pretty strange fellow when you really look. And you can Google, because I want to save and make this as short as concise as possible. But look into what he does with his free time. And what an interesting guy he is. Or the types of research he's chosen to take an interest in, including but not limited to genetically modifying mosquitoes to spread medication. But they accidentally got out and yada yada. Next thing you know, we have West Nile viruses and other interesting things. Anyway, Charles Darwin, another out there thinker, isn't he? Purportedly created, first person to discuss anyway, the theory of evolution so profoundly. Evolutionary master Charles Darwin is believed to be Asperger's. We got Alan Turing. Alan Turing is a brilliant philosopher, very intelligent fella. Read some of his books. You want some deep thinking to do? You want to color outside the lines and give you some to ponder on? Read this guy. Emily Dickinson. Eminem. My name is Marshall Mathers, right? Henry Ford. That's right. The creator of the Ford that you can't afford. Henry Ford. Sir Isaac Newton. Pretty out there thinker, right? Sir Isaac Newton. Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld diagnosed himself with autism, but I can totally see it. Because for me, I've always called it observational humor as a trait of autism. That's one of the good things for us is we can look at normal circumstances, and because our brain is listed like dictionaries of stuff, a million different ways to view, translate, or speak about it, some of the most obvious, normal, mundane stuff can be amusing. And that's why his jokes sound so dumb, but it's thoughts that everybody kind of doesn't give direct attention to. That's Asperger's, right? That obsession on the unusual. I mean, like Family Guy, I think, made fun of him well to say, have you ever noticed that bread is square and bologna is round? I mean, what's up with that? And like that's iconic for him to have said all the time, too. What's up with that? It's to ponder, and that should be a comedian's job anyway, but particularly an autistic comedian. The stuff that other people don't have time to ponder on. I describe my life often, and one of the reasons why I stay in a good mood more than not as imagining as if I wasn't even here. Like imagining as if everything happening to me was happening somewhere else, and I'm just kind of watching the playwright. You know, as if I'm. So things become more amusing. Being less emotionally attached to the situation, you're able to observe it from a different angle instead of being so. Well, I mentioned emotionally involved. So Isaac Newton, Jerry Seinfeld, Lewis Carroll. I don't know I did that in an Oprah accent, but I did. Nikola Tesla. We know him. Right? Another brilliant out there mind. Very freaking out there. Free energy. Oh, Steve Jobs. Out there. Money. Not going with the norm and fitting in isn't always necessarily a bad thing. You know, when you stand outside the box, even if people don't understand you, they at least want to tune in to study you. Did you know human zoos were a thing? Not to be too autistic. Thomas Jefferson. Fun fact about Thomas Jefferson, he had his own version of the Bible written. He called it the Jefferson Diaries. And actually pretty good. And he tried to make the Bible more sensible, as it were. Sounds like a strange thing to do, right? Sounds pretty out there. In between worlds, you might say. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Yep. Ding, 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 ding. The most brilliant minds sometimes are the most strange ones. One I should have put on this list is Edgar Allan Poe and Van Gogh. Isn't that interesting? That's how we'll remember him forever. Then, like, I made a good skit on that, too. He comes and gives the ear to his girlfriend. What's this? It's my ear. Do you like it? And he's, like, serious, but like this quirky, nervous guy. Oh, well, at least this will be a fun story to tell our kids someday. Oh, you wanted kids. I wish you would have told me that before I got you this. Goes to hand another package. Well, what about the confirmed and diagnosed people? Here's some more brilliant minds about to blow your minds, folks. For those who don't know, of course. Andy Warhol. Artist, brilliant visionaire. Sir Anthony Hopkins. Y'all know him. Brilliant mind. Wonderful actor. Wonderful creator. Carl Sagan. Astronaut, I believe. Memorized like 98% of information of everything subtext of this list. Carl Sagan, Courtney Love, Dan Aykroyd, Dan Harmon. Y'all remember Dan Harmon, right? The guy with the weird foot fetish that made iCarly and put a lot of compromising scenes and humor into that damn show. That is right? Fact check me on that. I might have him mixed up with another name, but I believe that was Dan Harmon. That was that chunky guy, right? Whoa! I don't know what happened here. There we go. Elon Musk. Everybody should know who he is right now. Quirky, practically android himself, Elon Musk. Tesla, right? SpaceX. The brain chip, which has successfully got a monkey to play Pong with his mind with a controller that was never plugged in off of the impulses and thought that he was playing Pong. Awesome stuff. He's got a new phone right now, even competing with Apple's best products, and pretty much says so long, Apple. Just recently bought Twitter. Y'all know him. That out there, strange guy, and you can tell in every interview. It's the way that he speaks, and he does this thing that should really kind of show you the autism, where he, instead of making a fool of himself or showing as many of the awkward things out loud, he'll do this withdrawn thing where he'll take an unusual and unordinary amounts of time before he answers a question. He'll literally sit there and calculate the most precise, appropriate way to give a response. And I understand that behavior 100%. Because to speak accurate and literally in a normal, casual fashion, there's room for so many questions. There's room for so much to come back at you. Or misinterpretations, just like we might be able to do with all the different words. So instead of creating a bunch of organic back and forth, but he does have a very decent rap on it, conversation, he'll sit and he'll calculate and he'll give you the most concise versions of all the responses once he has the best answer. So you can compare that to an average person who just answers immediately, and it's either swing or miss, but this person has to be this withdrawn way. Very direct, very literal, very calculated. We'll get there. Satoshi Tajiri, this guy, made Pokemon. Of course that dude's autistic. I mean, you got little electric bunny dudes that shoot lightning. Okay. Just interesting stuff. I can't imagine that level of creativity coming from someone that isn't autistic. In fact, one time I was nervous in coming to a new doctor and telling her that I have Asperger's when I'm ready to give her my list of diagnoses. Once I get to that part, I'm kind of defensive. And I add at the end of it, but I'd like to think I'm pretty smart. Her response was one of the most amazing ever. She said, well, I've never met an autistic person who wasn't. And that stood out. I was like, huh, true. Quirky though we may be, pretty damn smart. Susan Boyle and Tim Burton. And most of you should know Tim Burton. He's the guy that does all of that curly Q artwork, movies that look like eyelashes drawn, where you can see wind and it looks the same as every other damn thing. A spiral. Not to be too silly. I mean, he brought a lot of people love and joy and pretty much inspired emo culture. All right, so those are famous Asperger's people that are legitimately diagnosed there on that list. Pretty incredible, right? Asperger's doesn't sound so bad now. Call us an autist. It's pretty cool. All right, now we're going to go through the pros, which, holy shrimp, that looks like a lot of pros, don't it? And the cons. Decent fair amount of cons, too. And I tried to include a couple here in the middle. It's sort of a mixed bag, baby. So first we'll go to the pros. Pros. Often excellent long-term memory. We're also going to go over a list that someone else had made that seemed a bit long. So we'll do it last. Often an excellent long-term memory. Hyperfocus and hyperfixation could mean a potential study aid. There is a game company in Sweden that only hires Asperger's syndrome people. The reason for this, reportedly, autistic people don't make mistakes when writing in code. Pretty cool, huh? Task-oriented ways can lead to perfectionism or exceptional skill in particular interests of study. It's another interesting trait about ADHD, isn't it? When you make it relevant to the kid, there are the subjects that they seem to hyper-focus on. In fact, if you guys are having trouble getting your kids diagnosed with autism, one of the things that helped my case that had that doctor notice it was video games. My mom had come in, and one of the questions she had was, why is it that he can pay attention to everything else? Like, he loses track. I'll lose him halfway through a sentence. But when he's playing video games, he can give so much of his attention and time to. And she quoted some kind of study done where it's something about the gamma waves from playing video games. Okay? So something about the bioelectric shit coming from games. I guess like binaural beats, that the right frequencies of light and waves coming from this activate the gamma mind. We'll have to discuss what all that is in another video. Alpha, beta, theta, delta, gamma, and mu, the different brain states that can be measured by the electrocardiograph. And what exactly those mean. But that's what she's referring to. And that's kind of true because anxiety, which is a really high frequency, also is in the gamma waves. Gamma waves are also put into the background of horror movies in addition to color coding them as black and white to help bring you to that anxious, easier to be sensitive and state. Ready to pop, right? All right. Task-oriented ways can mention that. Strong logic and analytical skills. Honesty, loyalty, not afraid to tell the truth. That makes sense, right? Someone so pattern-oriented, someone so obsessive in ways probably has quite a list of rules for his own self to follow and might be very much Remember, he doesn't know what's socially acceptable. Have his own code instead and not be afraid to say, hey, this is what I am. Which is kind of cool in a world where we're misunderstood to be out loud or just hush up and go do your own thing. You'd think that's a good thing. Maybe I should have expanded upon that. Long-term and committed employees. Recalls facts and details others do not. Not as distracted from the task at hand. Remember that obsession. Thrives on repetition and routine. Yeah, there is a level of discomfort coming to new things, although my intelligence and belief in my intelligence, which might be different in another Asperger's person, they might not believe in themselves as much because they're different, so try, therefore, less. But since I do believe in those things, at first I approach with great anxiety and hesitation new tasks, but once I get to it and I apply myself, I master things very quickly and memorize things very quickly. And I love routine, so it's really stepping outside of the box part that's comfortable. Once you apply yourself, however, often has strong visual and spatial memory, often forgives easily, attention to detail, and ability to see patterns that others do not. So those are our pros. Here's our mixed bag, okay? It's a little bit of column A and column B. Obsessive, right? Should have started with this, because they're both kind of the same. Isolated types. Hard worker, study, lonely, antisocial, right? You can see how that's kind of beneficial and not beneficial. An antisocial person has plenty of time to do other things. A lonely person, however, antisocial and successful though he may be, or she may be, or whatever your pronouns of choice in this new world, that's equally hard to understand, where I, as an autistic person, need definitions and words. They have concepts and meanings. Otherwise, what's the point of communication, to my view, anyway? But obviously, being lonely, lacking company, antisocial, means you have a lot more time for work or study. So depending on what your addictions or interests are outside of the social world, what you choose to spend that time with, it could be pretty beneficial. Or it could be, for someone else, a compulsory masturbation habit or overeating or something else, depending on how they handle that antisocial life. But for a lot of us, we just choose to be goal-oriented and obsess on whatever the few areas of passion are for us. So, goal-oriented, task-oriented, rarely in the moment, in flux. Can seem cold, detached, or unemotional. Think about how Elon Musk approaches things so matter-of-factly. And sometimes he upsets people and sometimes he doesn't. It can seem pretty cold, but actually he's pretty smart. And when you take the time to think through and talk through each individual point that he puts so concisely and simply, which leads to this one. Communicates to get to the exit, more efficient, less organic, probes for seemingly irrelevant information, rushes or entirely ignores disinteresting data. Attentive to unusual detail. Notices more details, background, or supportive data than the presumed or focused main topic. May progress. May process things nonlinear. We mentioned that earlier a little bit as well, comparing it to ADHD. Or get lost in supportive information. You know those subtopics, the nonlinear thing. Again, sometimes to break that down a little more, when an autistic person is talking or an ADHD person is talking, they're very manic and very fast. And they might get lost in the subtext. If they mention one or often more subtopics or subpoints that are supposed to support the main thesis being given, the body, the large amount of the story or emotional memory of the subtopic may override the focus of where they were traveling to. The passion in those subtopics may be more than whatever had been started with. So you might get lost in the colorful sub-details or background noise, if you will, instead of staying focused on where we were trying to go. May process things nonlinear, get lost in supportive information. Excellent reductive reasoning skills, limited focused in unusual or familiar. Unusual or familiar. Okay, so those are kind of neutral here. And now, dun dun dun, we're going to go over the cons All right, so for the cons, inorganic social conversations. Let's have you focus here a little bit. Cons. Inorganic social conversations. What do you mean? Let's expand a little bit. Scripted conversations, probability matrix, programmed or calculated speeches and responses. Remember, we're strange, and as a strange person who identifies themselves as strange or others identify him, her, it as strange, we're going to probably make a sort of mental record of patterns and circumstances, words, clothing, what have you, that has worked before. Probability matrix. Okay. Some of these you can see link into one another quite well, which helps explain actually how we think with this map, as well as the traits pretty well on how they're shared in different categories, like we made the ADHD parallel and the bipolar parallel and the OCD parallel on why we might share some of those things. Difficulty balancing speaking and listening, which of course again could lead to scripted conversations. Types or talks in paragraph form. Extremely direct. People do not like that. Specific and technical. People don't like to feel that they're wrong is one reason for that. Being very direct can also unnecessarily and accidentally offend a person. That happens all the time with me, and more these days I don't really care to keep trying and failing to adapt to change rather than simply saying in advance, understand this is how I communicate. But being very direct, for example, a wife, I like hypothetical fun situations. I like humor about people being married. And something you'll often hear is stuff like the questions you're never supposed to answer as a husband. Do I look fat in this? Right? And me as an autistic person, however, I want to give you an honest answer. In this? Yeah. In general? No. Do I still find you aesthetically appealing both in and out of this? Yeah. But that's not how the average person thinks. And if I were to answer, do you look fat in this instead, as an emotional person, the other person that I'm talking to, the non-autistic person, might process the situation entirely differently, where I'm processing it as if it's information. This isn't an emotional thing being given to me yet. These are just words and concepts. And I pick apart the words and concepts, and I say, okay, in this. You could just reverse it just the same. In this, comma, do I look fat? And the answer obviously is no. In this, comma, you do not look fat, honey. And the honey should, you'd think, inform the other person into knowing that you still care about them and that the purpose is not necessarily to upset their feelings. But for a lot of people out there, the very next reaction, of course, will be reaction is totally different from a thought through and calculated action. Mind you, a reaction means an impulsive automatic response. The next reaction would probably be, so I look fat, and depression and self-attack, even if they don't outwardly express this. The way that they process that data might have been totally different from me, where I'm using dictionary brain. It might have instead be from an emotional place, and all they might have heard out of an entire concept is, I'm fat. Okay. Talks in paragraph form. Isn't that lovely? Processes and explains things literally. We're doing excellent here. Doesn't make many assumptions. Misses basic understanding of things going down the mental Rolodex, as Kevin Hogan put it. Check out his YouTube channel. He's an amazing fucking person. He is basically a master of neurolinguistic programming, of the conversational hypnosis and skills and sales techniques, those sorts of things. And he breaks down a lot of stuff and for YouTube videos as well. Again, I don't get paid for mentioning these people. I just like to promote things that I think can do good for the world. But he used this term first, the mental Rolodex, and kind of referring to people's subconscious mind and all the things he kind of has to pass through and calculate for when talking to a person. So doesn't make many assumptions, misses basic understanding of things going down the mental Rolodex to translate incoming speech and signals from their many definitions or perceivable understandings, and through process of elimination, reaches decisions. This is more time consuming. Asperger's, therefore, may be much slower and much more deliberate, remember that Elon Musk reference, in making decisions or stick to the familiar script, remember, probability matrices, calculated speech and responses, of what has worked successfully in the past. All right. Process and explain things literal. Dictionary brain leads to misunderstandings, and those with Asperger's whose obsession is language, and for many of us it is that because of these other subtext on how we process. Other cons. Difficulty registering or processing facial expressions. Body language, right? Tone of voice. Jokes or sarcasm. Vague or abstract concepts. We often need specificity. Someone with Asperger's syndrome usually has good language skills and may be very sarcastic or funny themselves, but may not always pick up on the sarcasm of others. That's 100% true for me. It's very fucking strange that I can be so jovial and joking, but still have to make sure to put my emotions in check all the time and wait a minute before reacting and stuff, because you can think someone's picking on you or something, but we don't immediately understand when someone else is joking necessarily. We don't always necessarily see, for example, if someone's flirting and they're playing with their hair. I had one guy pull me aside, one of my best buddies, and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, why didn't you get her number or whatever? And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? And he was like, for the past 15 minutes, he's been x-raying your clothes off and playing with her hair. And I'm like, I guess I didn't notice. But another thing is, since I live pretty different, I don't obsess on sex as much as the average man. I mean, I enjoy it when it's around. It's wonderful. I'm a good partner and stuff. And when I do have a partner, I have a lot of it. However, it's much more of an obsession in other people. That's one of their 3 hyperfixated subjects, in my opinion. But a lot of that, see, that's all subtext. The nonverbal communication and body language. So all of that just bypassed senses, since I was much more interested in the conversations being had. Right after, of course, I knew, so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess she did do all that. I immediately registered and went back in my brain and saw that all those things did occur that the man was reporting. Vague or abstract concepts often need specificity. Someone with Asperger's syndrome usually has good language skills, and maybe, I'll mention that, may find it hard to understand expectations of others within conversations. True. May need more time to process information, and often may find it easier to understand clear and consistent language rather than abstract turns of phrase. And that's so true that I'm going to tell you this, folks. I believe that's the last one on this list. Look at all that we went through. Check this out. So, instead of abstract turns of phrase, consistent language, it's so real for me because I know everything else is going to offend one another. Both of us are going to have more problems, more challenges, get more offended with things. Let's switch this camera here. So it takes so long to have a conversation. And I'm also, again, Asperger's, rushing towards the exit, talking with purpose, calculation, speech, etc., and so on. And the way I see it is it's going to take so long to get to balance and happiness, contentment that we could have with one another. Get past all these barriers of verbal speech, barriers of how much we know each other, etc., and so on, continuing to operate, again, in this fashion. I think that directness is the best approach. Honesty is the best approach. For example, this is some of the advice I give people. I say in relationships, in romantic relationships, do you need more than one partner? I make sure to have these kind of conversations in advance. I say, well, I don't. You can if you'd like to, but I prefer honesty. And as long as you're honest with me, that's rule number 1, honesty. You never have a need to lie to me. You'd be surprised what I could accept. If you're direct with me, wink, you can be whatever you want. You know, things like bipolar exist. I'm called autistic. I'm Asperger's. I can be pretty strange and experimental and creative in character in a way. So literally, words like good and evil aren't so strong in my word. It's more functionality and context. So anybody can be anything they want. Now make sure to lay down a few rules. You never need to lie. Be honest with me and I will love you forever. Lie to me and that's when we're really at war, because one or more of us are going to be acting if someone is a liar. And I'm wondering why we're doing all these extra steps, because the next thing is I'm very generous. And I would gladly, see, very forgiving was on that list, right? I'm very forgiving and I'm very generous as well, very considerate of others' needs, even if I find them confusing to have all these extra steps, for example. And that means it's going to feel like, in a way, that I'm working for you. And I've given clear instructions on who I am. Meanwhile, other people aren't as informative, and their desires may constantly change. Do you want one partner? Do you want multiple partners? Is lying even the defense mechanism? There's so many things to have to calculate while giving you patience and understanding, But the direct approach is the best way, because I can be very sacrificing, very serving, very loyal, very dedicating. You saw that list in different perspectives. So it's a lot easier for me and for you to get what you want. It's easier for me to be well received, right? And well liked. And it's not a sacrifice. I'm not contradicting my nature and shape-shifting into something that I'm not. I'm everything and nothing. It's the best way to understand it. But more importantly, it's easier for you to get what you would like out of me, even if it might make you seem like a narcissist or a nasty person, which I think might be the fear in the average person. We like direct. Which leads me to the next object. I would rather you say fuck you to my face than play through the emotional rhetorics and ups and downs and stuff. At least then I know you're upset. What if I didn't necessarily register that? What if I thought we were having a mere calm conversational differences and discussing things that could be changed or improved upon in the future? Depending on if I'm emotional with you or not, which may or may not happen. If I lose my emotional cool, we're all fucked. But if not, then I'm having to be the mature one, which can also be hated in that moment. I'm not having a heart, cold, detached, heartless, because I'm not joining in that emotional rhetoric or as upset or as angry as the other person in the moment. But we're all trying to figure out the code of ethics on how to make this work. So I make sure to lay out the law in advance. This is how I am. This is how I operate. You can accept me and deal with this or not, but you're going to have difficulty. And because I know that you will have difficulty with me, and I with you, and that's a guarantee at times, which will come and go, the best approach is straightforward honesty. So that means even if you're going to end up thinking that you're expressing or doing something that I don't like, it is the best way. And I often give people a parable of a story about plucking the flower, not plucking the flower. I tell people a flower can be very admirable. A pansy is not a rose. They're very different. They smell different. They look different. They have different colors. They grow under different conditions. But they're both called flower. And they both can be appreciated. They both have scents. Now, in aesthetic beauty, for example. But what happens when you pluck a flower? It dies. It legitimately dies. It ceases to be a flower and now is dead instead. Or it ceases to be a flower and now it is a tea and a beverage. Or it ceases to be a rosebud and now is a rolled up, burnt on fire marijuana blunt. All strange to me. That means to me, in my everything in the world has meaning kind of autistic mind, that means you killed the rose. That beautiful fucking thing stopped being a thing because of you. So, in all actuality, you didn't appreciate the rose at all. You had to turn it into something to serve you, turn it into something selfish. So for me, to clarify and summarize all that information right there, the very best way is the direct approach. At least, even whether you're selfish or not, you're real. And everything can work much smoother if the other person is as real as you are. So communication is key, as they say. Or how about in Mallrats, the fake psychic with the third nipple, as she said? Understanding is only reached, first, through confrontation. So true. Or as a Christian, I think it was my buddy Dale, who's accomplished amazing things. He's got his own parkour gym and all kinds of cool stuff in New Jersey. Really excellent guy. He's, what do you call those guys? Evangelist, goes around and introduces people to God and stuff. One of the most delightful people that you can meet. He put it like this, if I can recall his exact words. In a post, he said, you have to be willing to face the uncomfortable. And I've talked about this concept in different ways. Most people don't face the uncomfortable. They plug it up, they put a pill, they smoke a joint, they drink a beer, they beat off to fill the empty space of having to face their own thoughts, feelings, or the emptiness. But I say face the empty, face the uncomfortable. Only through that will you find understanding. And when you understand yourself, you'll be surprised how smart you are. Not to be too egotistical or narcissistic. How much you'll understand the world. The more you understand yourself and the mechanics of how brains operate, the more you'll understand the world and how other people operate. May need more time to process information. Direct is better than abstract. Dun-doo-doo. So, I had some other things we were going to go over here. But I think we're doing very well and very concise in short time so far. So, what about the treatment for Asperger's? Because ultimately some of these topics are going to help lead into a documentary that I'm working on called Big Pharma, Problems and Solutions to Big Pharma. And it's going to cover some things like, I'm going to be interviewing people, doctors, nurses. I have some people on board. It's hard to get people in the profession because a lot of people are afraid to lose their jobs for giving their real opinions and tell me as much. But I have some on board. And I'll be interviewing patients and other people with mental disorders as well. And these are some of the questions I'm going to ask you. This is not written down. I'm going to freestyle here. What is your illness, if you have one? How would you describe your relationship with your doctor or caretaker? Do they listen to you? Do they give you time to speak and clarify your thoughts? That's very important for Asperger's, for example. Being heard. I didn't feel heard. I felt hurt. Because of the unique way of speaking, and because just imagine this, if it were the other way around, instead of the Asperger's person not knowing what's socially acceptable, what if you also didn't know how to be an exceptional listener? If they're a little different in their manner of speaking, that means you need to, as the mature one on the right, take more time, more focus, more care to the needs of this person who's beneath you in that skill, right? That makes sense to me anyway. Well, at least if you're in a profession like doctor or shrinker or a psychologist or anything like that, because that's what you've chosen to do, is you've chosen to take care of those individuals, allegedly, not just be better at it than them, right? Okay, these are some of the kind of questions I'm going to ask. What are the difficulties you face in going to a hospital, if any? What are the medicines that worked for or against you, etc.? Side effects. All right, now here's where it gets interesting, though. For Asperger's, for autism, there's no known medication. That's right. I've had to go through that interesting thing myself because I wasn't going to get help for my ADHD from the start. She's like, I have no problem. I guess we can mention her name. Jamie Dimon did in Virginia Beach. She said, I have no problem giving you medication for your ADHD. Even Adderall, which by definition is legal speed. There are two ingredients to it, amphetamines and dextroamphetamines. But just to warn you guys, first off, you can't overprescribe it. It turns out that over 60% of adults who take it get the help that they need. Over 50% of children who take it get the help that they need. Okay? And it turns out you can't really abuse this pill, which was a common theory for a while that slowed down people prescribing it. Because people were allegedly taking it as a study aid. But the studies have been done now, and it shows that Adderall can't be used as a study aid because for people without ADHD, it increases their focus, but it reduces their short-term memory. So, you seemingly think you're absorbing and focusing on this detail, but you're actually reducing your memory in the process. So you can't use it in the study, which means you really can't abuse it. Now, remember, it's speed. It's legal speed. Dextroamphetamine and amphetamines. Look how much information I got stored in this brain cave. Now, what that means is, and I often give the description like this. Here's coffee with a little tea bag and that actually has coffee in it. How cool is that? Folgers. All right, so let me take a couple more sips because of the particular demonstration I'm going to give you. All right, cool. So the cup's about a third full, right? For the sake of argument, it's a third full. Looks much better in black and white, though, I think. Anyway, so this is a regular person's energy, the liquid in this cup. Okay, the brain works on something called neuroplasticity. For every area of the brain that you add to, okay, the opposite area is subtracted, right? Okay, dopamine, serotonin, yada. Okay, there's a balance to everything in the brain, and your brain is much like a bunch of cups. Compartmentalization, right? We have a bunch of different quadrants in our brains that are dominantly believed to be responsible for certain things. We also have something called neuropathways. What are neuropathways? This is a very brief understanding, and I think all of you can find this. Neuropathways are the branches or connections, if you will, in between different areas of the brain. However, the brain doesn't do what's smart, it does what's familiar. What does that mean? That means that those neuropathways that are most often traveled are going to likely be traveled again. Okay? Doesn't do what's smart, it does what's familiar. And it gives you an idea, now knowing what neural pathways are, if you didn't already, that when you pull from one area, that other information is sacrificed. If you've ever seen a cartoon, The Ring of the Nine Dragons, being used by Oni or Omi on Shaolin Showdown, he had a magic ring that could turn him into multiple clones of himself, up to 9 people. And the idea was, though, and this is the moral of that kind of thing, it's compartmentalization in comic form, is when you put on the ring, you could split yourself into 9 people, but that means my intelligence as a person is split. I'm 1/9 if I choose to make 9 clones instead of 2, say. I'm 1/9 as smart, 1/9 as fast, 1/9 as strong, okay? Etc. and so on. If I made 2, I'm 50% as smart, I'm 50% as strong, etc. Okay, so that's a little bit how the brain works. So these little cups, for every cup that I pour into, it comes away from another area. Now let's say this particular cup, I'm not going to mess up my coffee, so you're going to have to visualize for yourself after a second. But let's say that this particular cup, the liquid represents your adrenaline level, your hyperactivity, your focus, ADHD kids. Okay, and if you're not ADHD, this is your cup, 1/3 full. When you take Adderall or any kind of speed or upper for a non-ADHD person, your cup fills. So it's noticeably more manic, it's noticeably more hyper, it's noticeably more energetic. It gives a non-ADHD person, a person with low adrenaline, a boost. Now here is what happens for ADHD people. I remembered the main topic too well. Okay, so for ADHD people, it's the opposite. Okay, so we just learned that a non-ADHD person, their energy level is 1/3 of a brain full. They take pills, they go up in energy, they fill. For a ADHD person, however, they're already 2/3 full in their energy cup. When they take the speed, how it works for them, when they take the dextroamphetamine and amphetamine, when they take the Adderall or Ritalin before my body immuned itself to that, body doesn't like foreign things. It loves to learn instead. Okay, so for ADHD person, 2/3 energy level, when they take it, the drug does affect the same way. It adds more adrenaline. It causes their cup to fill. However, because you can only hold so much, because there are things called reuptake inhibitors, etc., and so on, because your brain recycles and moves around those neurons following those neural pathways, what that means is when I have too much of them, it causes them to dump out. Therefore, instead of 2/3 full, take the shot of Adderall or whatever, stupid way to say it, now we're reduced. It poured out some of that excess. It knew we were overflowing. Our brain did something about it, and it reduced the level of adrenaline, thus seemingly calming down the focus, the attention span, the energy level of the ADHD child. It has different effects for that very simple and understand, visual, easy to remember reason. Their energy level, ADHD, already up here. Overflow, pour out, forcible calm down. The crash of an energy drink or a coffee, if you will. Another reason why we're often addicted to these kind of things. We like it. It feels like a mainstay. An energy drink to me just means like if I was depressed, I could drink an energy drink because I'll just go back to normal. I'm used to being manic and fast, and you don't have time to slow down and be in that crippled vice. I might get anxious instead, which is another side effect of the same illness. So we're already like that with or without extra stimulants or drugs. In fact, another fun fact, because one of the few things found to help people with autism, energy drinks. There's certain ingredients in energy drinks, L-carnitine I think is one of them, that turn out to help Asperger slightly. Google that. Okay, so there's no known medication. There is no known treatment or aid for Asperger's. I had discussed that Jamie Dimon in Virginia Beach would give me medication for my ADHD for a reason. We're going to complete that story. She said she had no problem doing that, but first we want to get your anxiety under control. If only. Sounded like good news, right? where I'm worried that doctors are so uneducated these days, and they often are, that they rush to the exit on what's worked for a familiar patient for someone else at some point in time. And so, before I go to Jamie Dimon, I'll try to remember that thought. Uh-oh. Hand mannerisms, compulsive tics. You'd be surprised what works for us. Jamie Dimon. If only I can remember the segue now. We'll just continue straight forward. I really wanted that supportive one. I got it. Hospital. Trying to get myself hospitalized one time. And a doctor saw me in the back of an emergency room. And he says, after answering so many people's questions over and over and over again, he now knows I've got ADHD, bipolar, blah, blah, blah. Again, honesty. And he says, so you have ADHD and bipolar. And I've also already had conversations to say what I'm allergic to, what I'm not allergic to, blah, blah, blah. He says, well, this is an exact quote now, I give all of my patients with ADHD and bipolar, Cyprexa, and Depakote. And I tried to be calm because, again, I'm autistic. I could just immediately say my every thought and be reactive, but I back up a pace in my mind. I talk very slow and calculated. Remember the Elon Musk depiction I gave you guys. If we choose to slow down and try to be that presentable character. I said, well, I'm not everybody else. That's without giving a long explanation of Asperger's, this, that, and another, again, which you should already know. I said, I'm not everyone else. I have been on Depakote. I'm allergic to it. I don't know about Cyprexa. If you give me a printout, I will make an educated decision. He says, well, I'll check back on you a little bit. Maybe you'll change your mind. He's more manic than I am. I'm in cold, calculated mode. So he goes off. Almost 10 minutes pass, almost. He comes back in, all fast and pacey and stuff, and he says, so, you going to take that medication? At this point, I'm a little more agitated. I've already had this conversation many times in different ways now, right? I said, no, I'm not going to take that medication. I'm not going to take anything that I'm allergic to. I don't care if you could bring me back. Probably shouldn't have added that last quip. Seems argumentative, right? To a normal person, perhaps. The very immediate response I got, because what they hear, most doctors and people, okay, I'm an autistic person genuinely seeking help. What he heard was opposition. What he heard was a refusal to cooperate, right? So he said, well, so he asked, oh, are you willing to take that medication? I told him no. Gave you the answer right there. And he says, well, then there's nothing I can do for you. And he goes to leave. And I get discharged. Sounds retarded, doesn't it? Let's keep in mind, before you get triggered there, retard, R-I-T-A-R-D, actually technically means to slow down and pace or tempo. It's a musical term. So let's bring that word back by its actual definition. He was acting pretty slow, pretty unaware. But he might catch up to speed later on, maybe. But see, that's the problem with a lot of doctors. They rush to what worked for some past thing, much like the autistic person with their scripted language in a way. They do that with medicine. They rush towards what they've seen work somewhere else. But the autistic mind particularly is a very unique chemistry. More time and effort might need to be made. You might need to listen to their past history of what medications worked for or against them, what the side effects were. You might need to take a little bit longer in conversation instead of rushing towards the exit, putting them in a panic attack. Going through all of this, battering them down, acting. I was in a hospital one time. I was in the strapped down, having full anxiety attacks. I had a kidney stone, all of this stuff going on at the same time. They strapped me down. I've got claustrophobia as well, so they put all these extra straps on me for my safety. And I'm trying to explain that, hyperventilating in the hospital van going on the way to the hospital. And they said, well, we don't have to help you at all. We can drop you off right here if you're being uncooperative. So, yeah, we're making a documentary, folks, called The Problems and Solutions to Big Pharma. That's how a lot of doctors handle it. So let's go back to the story of Jamie Dimon in Virginia Beach with mental health management. So she wants to get my anxiety under control, she tells me. She has no problem giving me even a controversial drug these days, which we just discussed on how it's been proven to be hooey. The worries about why not to give out that medication. So she said she will once we get my anxiety under control, because I believe that that's a much more serious issue for you, Kevin. So we're going to try to get your anxiety under control, and then we'll get around to that. But first, I want to help you with that anxiety. Nice guy Kevin tries, again, patience, slowness, wait to explode, because, I mean, another thing that people perceive is we're know-it-alls, and we act like we know more than these trained professionals that went to school for maybe 4 years, 35 years ago, and then stopped reading updated medical journals and learning anything new or changes that we found out since. Like how the Adderall statistics that I gave you, or that we're treating bipolar the same way we used to, which is in the theory that stress and depression related genes are related, and it turns out that they're not actually, and activities further up in the brain cause these sorts of things. So any medication that's given out for a mood disorder is literally 50% or less effective, because of the fact that it's kind of a roll of the die. We're hoping that that's the chemical that's imbalanced in your brain. So when it does work, that's why it works. But because most drugs are based off of those old rules and conclusions when they were being formed to being used as a treatment, then obviously only that roll of the die. If it's right, it'll work. If you're imbalanced in dopamine, say, which is another thing this dumb lady said, is another thing you should notice, again, Asperger's, is if a person is self-medicating, which most do, what kind of self-medication do they do? What kind of street drugs do they do? What is it that they're really interested in? It'll give you an idea of what works for them, or somewhere in the middle of the avenue that they're used to approaching. And sort of immediately define that. For example, if anxiety, dopamine is the reward system in the brain, right? Dopamine is produced when you smoke marijuana. Dopamine calms you. With autism, you might have a lot of anxiety. You probably will have a lot of anxiety, which we're also going to discuss here. A regular person's anxiety on 10 is an autistic person's anxiety all the time. That's hour 1. Okay? I saw a lady that was autistic who teaches other teachers who teach people with autism. And she was given a seminar, and once she dropped that fact about the 1 versus 10, the audience, one of the people had a question, and they said, well, if this is this difficult for you, if you're this anxious all the time, and you can see it in some people, like look up comedian Tim Minchin, who has like crazy frizzy Beethoven hair, comes onto stage barefoot, has pure, very noticeable anxiety to him, but absolutely wonderful. So to give that visual, now if you're like this, if you're this anxious all the time, now you know what that looks like a little bit. How are you able to give this speech? And she gave a very logical, rational answer. Well, because this is my speech. This is my seminar. If you don't like it, which I hope you do, you are free to leave. But technically, I'm in control here. I'm the one in control, and I'm the one speaking. Beautiful answer. Really. Like, technically, she don't have to call on everybody. She can answer things in the way that she chooses. Chooses how long or short each response is. Makes you wonder about a lot of public speakers. So Jamie Dimon wanted to give me something for the anxiety and get that under control, which is impossible first. Obviously, I don't have any medications. I'm not on anything to help me now. She wanted to give me propranolol, which, interestingly enough, funny thing about drugs, may curb gay subconscious bias. Like, there were studies on using this to help people who didn't like gays. That doesn't make me have very much faith in the drug, but what's cool about this drug is that it's given to manage your physical anxiety symptoms, which means that instead of giving you something that's with your brain chemistry, that's a hit or a miss, for one, and is very long lasting, right? Or maybe depending on what you take. This works on the physical reasons instead of the chemical reasons. So it actually slows your heart rate, kind of like lorazepam or diazepam that snipers take to slow down their heart rate for a steady, untrembling shot. Metal Gear Solid reference pretty much, but it's true. Now, that could be used pretty well for anxiety, but they didn't want to give me that medication because it has a potential for addiction. Why does it have a potential for addiction? Because it activates right away. You immediately notice the effects. So that's not going to be the choice medicine, whether it works or not, to go out and give. Another problem with these pharmaceutical people. If you're the one out there deliberately giving medicine to people who don't need it, is totally different than basically cock blocking. I don't know a better word for it. Those who could greatly use it and who have used it in the past to great success without any abuse, without any reports or trouble or any of those kind of things. If you don't have a reason to assume someone would be a criminal, I don't think that you should. It seems pretty silly to me. But she gave me this, and it slows the heart rate down. which the first day I took it is the only day it worked. Thursday I took it was beautiful, actually. I've never known being calm like that ever in my entire life. I laid on the ground and sat still. ADHD gone. Asperger's gone, because I could just be calm. No excess worry, no internal freak out, no anxiety. I literally, I wanted to go to sleep because I was so comfortable laying there, but I also didn't go to sleep because I was afraid that this was temporary. What if it ends? I've never been this calm, this comfortable. So it was nice for that first day, but every day after, and maybe there's an accumulative effect or something, you're supposed to take it like PRN, like as needed. But the next day, it was just my heart having bipolar, basically. Now it's not a steady, slow rate. Now it's fast sometimes and slow other times. And that made me very extremely nervous, which gave me more, not less, anxiety because of that physical sensation. So I tried to say something about this. Of course, the lady just wrote me another script for it. Didn't hear a damn thing I said. And wants to get this anxiety under control, which is impossible to repeat. There is no balanced anxiety. You power through it. You might do things and just let the anxiety, but still give the comedy show, Tim mentioned. But ultimately it doesn't. There is no cure. Not for the level of anxiety that autistic people have. There's no known medication. Okay, that physical. Okay, I mentioned lorazepam as a potential use for that. I used it temporarily inside a mental hospital. You can get checked out and stay for a week and be evaluated and all that stuff, but they wouldn't release you with it, which makes it, again, look forward to the documentary, Problems and Solutions to Big Pharma. It makes it very ridiculous that you can go into an emergency care facility, actually get the help you need. They find stuff that works, that balances you out to where they feel safe, you're not a threat to yourself, others, all the extra details that come with wanting to let you go back, return to the world. They watch the miraculous difference between before and after these pills. They give you pills to help you with the life that you're having, only for you to get to the end of the up to 7 days of them evaluating and treating you, and then go to outpatient services on the outside where they're not going to give you these because Adderall is allegedly people abuse it. No, not really. It turns out the studies have been done. It's almost impossible to abuse. Same thing for anything else. We mentioned Ativan, right? Okay, well, it has a potential for addiction because it actually works. And right away, so we're not going to give you that on the outside. Then why are you giving patients while they're in here getting help? Stuff that works, only for them to go out and then get a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, or to just switch it all together. Wouldn't you just automatically give them the other stuff? It doesn't make any sense. So look forward to that. I hope you've enjoyed this video here, folks, of what is autism. Okay. I hope that it made it a little bit easier for you to, well, get along with people, to have a little bit more understanding. See, because I mentioned that it's basically the new fag word. People use it like an insult, but they don't know what it means. Quite frankly, an autistic person is probably smarter than you. It's just like they're not socially as interested or skilled, or both, in the same things. But, for example, I'm a hacker since grade school. Since grade school. I taught my mom how to use the internet. I made straight A's and B's for the first several grades of my life, like up to like 5th, 6th grade. I had a whole bag full of honor roll pins from getting those straight A's and B's. I memorized, even when, due to ADHD and bipolar and autism or whatever else you want to slap on a kid because they're different, when I went to special ed class, because I was running out of schools to go to for disrupting class with the ADHD, etc. and so on. So I ended up in a special ed class in 6th grade. And I'll never forget, my teacher's name was Ruby Rasnick, RR like railroad, easy mnemonic way of remembering it. At the end of every week, we'd line up. Every Friday, we'd line up to answer questions about stuff we learned during the week. Right? Okay, so you would ask us all questions, and whether you got it right or wrong, didn't matter. You go to the back of the line, and the class is like 14 kids. And so I would go to the front, go to the line, get to the front of the line, answer your question, and the reward to incentivize kids for learning and stuff was you get a full-size payday bar. Yeah, dude. I don't know if it's why I love paydays to this day, but probably because I was very much rewarded with these payday bars. I get to the front of the line every single time I answer those memorized, regurgitated facts that we're here for. Get a full-size payday, move to the back of the line. Cool part was there was no limit. Some kids were jealous. Other kids thought I was cool because of it. But ultimately, I would leave with like 4 to 8 candy bars. It was never less than 4 every single week because that's how much I could kind of subconsciously pay attention. Now, in special ed, it's different. In regular class, ADHD, you're getting in trouble. In special ed, they're kind of expecting you to be a little kind of abstract, which means I can do things and learn my way, which actually gives me more, not less focus, right? Okay? You can't drum on the desk in regular class. You can't listen to music in regular class. Interruptions are very bad in a regular class. If you make it interesting to the person learning with the ADHD, though, you know, like if I can tap on my fucking self and do this without you overly questioning my behavior when it's irrelevant unless the drumming is really loud, right? But if it's on me, for example, you can't hear this. Then I'm making the subject interesting. So, like, there was lots of little quirky techniques that I could practice in there where it's much more, I'm allowed to apply myself more to that. And one of the greatest techniques for me was subconscious learning. So instead of it seeming like you're not paying attention, my mom would get on me as a kid, for example. It's just like, and my mom would hit me something fierce. And she would always believe, no matter what, that I was never paying attention to her because I didn't make eye contact. So that's another trait I should have put on the list, was a lack of eye contact from autistic people. Because we're overthinking everything else anyway, you got to imagine, it makes me feel much easier focus while I'm not looking directly at you. It's almost like I'm gathering my thoughts. I'll look over at you every now and then as if I'm bringing them over with my eyes and then going back over to the mental filing cabinets. But my mom would always act like I was never listening, to the length of literally being like, "You're not fucking listening, Kevin." Yes, I am, Mom. I swear. No, you're not. What did I just say? And I was expected, so this might be another reason for the memory, to repeat verbatim what she just said. And more often than not, I had listened, it turned out. Almost word for word, I could do it. But that's because I'm not actually directly focusing on her. You hating me right now, me being wrong or you know, a bad guy or kid isn't necessarily interesting. So the focusing on other things that are more interesting, whether it be a crack in the wall, a paint splotch that looks like Donald Duck, what have you, it actually allows my particular mind to subconsciously absorb more of the information. It forces it to be more interesting. It's now attached, like a mnemonic nickname. Dave has a red car, we call him Red Dave. That doesn't exist, it just made that up, but we now can remember Dave's name because of the red part. That assistive detail helps you remember that. So it helps support the story and make Dave seem more interesting. That's kind of how my mind works. So if I'm not as directly focused on you, I actually end up absorbing a lot. I've even gone through periods where I'll play 5 different shows or movies or documentaries at once, and it will actually allow me to absorb a lot of details. You'd be surprised. Versus if I were to singularly focus on one thing at a time and drone into a boring church slumber. You know? All right. So, we'll have other videos on mental illness and things in the future, spaced out, covering a wide variety of topics. But I hope this helps some of you folks out there really love thy neighbor, as it were. It's misunderstood, autism. Yeah, we mentioned the fact that there's a game company in Sweden that hires only autistic kids. That's pretty interesting. You know, highly technical, analytical minds. There's just kind of a disconnect with social ways of doing things. And there should be a lot less prejudice, I think. Because, like the bullied kid who brings a gun to school and cracks, and imagine now, if minus the gun, an intelligent Asperger's person, of which now, watching this video, you know is capable of quite a lot. Imagine what would happen if all that intelligence wasn't the friendly, forgiving, loving, etc., and was actually used against you. Then you could be right for calling them the bad guy, viewing them negatively. But Really imagine the struggles you might have if all of these potential skills and traits were really against you. Imagine if they really were those things. These aren't disgusting, negative, worthless, incapable people more often than not. As we saw here from the 3 levels, there's many different levels to autism. But the traits and how they function, the majority of the time, their approach to information and to social situations are similar, if not identical. So we have one more thing to go over here. I think we should anyway. I don't know how much of it is already covered in here. I decided not to go over this list in advance and save it for last because it seemed like the longest. So, according to this list, which is from Asperger'sChild.com. See, 2010. Some people knew this in 2010, yet nobody seems to know what Asperger's is these days. So let's look at this list. I love their bulleted function. Looks less fun than my I'm on map, but let's go here. Dun, da, 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 ding, 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 ding. All right, that looks beautiful, don't it? I was going to play a clip from Butters earlier, but I decided not to. So, what do we do here? Okay, we're just going to have to go back to this view. It went gone. Bye-bye. Give me just a second, folks. Kershaw. Okay. Luckily, I'm decently organized. I have all the stuff in a folder, so even if I hit a wrong key or something, we're good. So most Aspergers are easily able to forgive others, are conscientious, reliable, and honest, are enthusiastic, and have a propensity for obsessive research, thus developing a broad and deep base of knowledge in subjects of interest. Most Aspergers are free of prejudice, are intelligent and talented, are less inclined to be fickle or bitchy than their neurotypical counterparts, are more likely than those of the general population to pursue a university education. Systems, schematics, concepts, designs, patterns, are not inclined to lie to others. I love that me thinking that I chose to be an honest person and believe in Satyagraha, which means truth force. It's Sanskrit, by the way, and practiced by people like Mahatma Gandhi. Being influenced by people like that and Greek philosophers going up. I love how, though, that they can say, oh, well, it's because I'm Asperger's. But I wonder, maybe Asperger's led me to all those same interests that also continue to influence me. Are not motivated, are not likely to be bullies, con artists, or social manipulators. Are not motivated by an intense social drive to spend time with whoever happens to be available. Are persistent, and when they set their minds to something or make a promise, they can usually be trusted to follow through. Remember that get to the exit modality we spoke of. Are unlikely to launch unprovoked attacks, verbal or otherwise, unprovoked. Are unattained by the judgments that people often make regarding one another's social position or scales. 100%. Remember how we kind of began this, kind of philosophically asking, doesn't know what's socially acceptable or has a different definition on what is socially superior or successful. Unlikely, are very accepting of the quirks and idiosyncrasies of others. Don't pluck the flower. Every flower is beautiful. The star card of the tarot represents the individuality of every unique thing. And I like to tell people it like this. Let's say that you draw. My mom draws. She doodles, actually, according to her. I like her doodles. They're cartoony and girly and kind of cool and would work great in newspapers, to say the least. But according to her, every time she does this, they're just doodles and they're crap and they're garbage. But here's the thing. Remember, don't pluck the flower. Every star's unique. I guarantee you, no one in the world, maybe a savant, which is an autistic person, savant syndrome falls into the spectrum of Asperger spectrum disorder. I mean, autism spectrum disorder. Um, a savant might be able to perfectly mimic a famous master painting from somebody. But apart from that, uh, no one in the world can reproduce your artwork, can reproduce your shittiness quite as equally shitty. They're going to do a little better, a little worse. They can't do the same job that you did the same way that you did, usually. So that makes you a unique star. That makes you a beautiful flower. To me, I can appreciate so many things in life and lose concepts like good and evil because it's all relative, and see you for what you are. A doodler? No, you're an amazing artist of a unique you-type design. Dr. Seuss said it well, who might have also been autistic. He says, today you are you that is truer than true. There was no one alive who is youer than you. Okay? Can be selective, choosing honest, genuine, dependable people who share their interests. Remember what I said about being cold and seemingly snake-like? Because if you choose intellect over emotions, it's not to say we don't have very much so strong emotions, but it's to say that we try first modality to go through the logical path first, because we know and calculated our shit just as much as we calculated you, the emotions and the barriers and the length of the journey and such. So we might seem colder and we spend time around people who function similar or supportive to us. Can bring up a variety of interesting facts, definitely. In Criminal Minds, Spencer Reid wasn't that Criminal Minds? He's pretty much autistic. Now, he's a fictional character who I'm sure is force-fed all of these facts in the script to regurgitate in the live performance. So probably not a real autistic person. However, some people relate cancer signs to autism. Some people think all cancers are autistic, which is interesting. Some of the stereotypes of what a cancer sign is in the zodiac are a lot of autistic traits. And interestingly enough, the person who plays Spencer Reid's mom, that crazy woman, would be crazy. She actually is a cancer in real life. So in a way, she's a little autistic. Most Aspergers can recall fine details that others missed. Most Asperger people can listen to people's problems and provide a fresh perspective, offering pure assessments based on the information provided. That taking a step back bit we talked about. Elon Musk mode. Oops. Are very accepting of the quirks and idiosyncrasies of others. Can recall fine details that others miss, can relax and be themselves without fearing social censure. 100%. I get kicked off places on the internet even all the time because I'm me, and you're either going to like me or not. You'll spend time around or support, and this goes for every social media network, every website in the world, every person in the world. If you really like me, then that's why you're there. Why should I have to be a different person for you to love me, and vice versa? I'd love to appreciate you for the actual you, not for what you do for me, not for the shapes you take for me, not for the extra and the taking turns on who's in charge, who's dominant, who's submissive, who's sacrificing, and who's given. And that's so unreal, so many extra steps, and no one gets genuine happiness that way, in my opinion. So, of course I don't feel social censure. You already hate me, or you don't. But, even if I choose that attitude, then I've already pre-prepared, knowing that you probably have a good probability roll to not like my way of doing it. So, do I please Group A? Do I please Group B? Or do I be mean like Group A and B, tuning it out at their own love, intellect, and pleasure? Can relax and be themselves without feeling social censure. Don't attack the reputations of those around them. Now there should be exceptions known. It says most people, but all of this is also true for me. But since Asperger's doesn't know what's socially acceptable, one of the things to remember for some of us is we're constantly learning from you. So if we're constantly learning from you, whatever you've said, whatever rules you've given us to go by, whatever behaviors you've exhibited, we're kind of learning that this is the acceptable language, this is the acceptable behavior, this is what everybody else is doing. So now we're allowed to fit in and do this thing that everybody else is doing, even if that is warfare, psychological manipulation, raising your voice, etc. We might not be the first ones to attempt such behavior, it being outside of our preferred mechanical way of being, going toward the exit, logical, etc. first, but it doesn't mean that we're not somewhat adaptable and pulling in that information and mimicry. Remember that the echolalia, for example, in learning. Okay, that's what we're doing. Oh, you're yelling. I guess we're yelling now. Fuck me. No, fuck you. But then it's interesting that the first person that started the irrational behavior, verbally speaking, anyway. They're the ones who end up more hurt now that you've joined them in the irrational behavior. So it doesn't mean that they won't necessarily do it, but keep in mind that we're pretty abstract people. We might be learning from you, and as in words of Bugs Bunny, when you can't beat them, join them. You know what I'm saying? And that would be obviously like KTV episode 1. Then we might attack the reputations of other people, but we still might do so with a true way. So is it? And we get into fine hair splitting lines and that technical thing that is Asperger's. Don't discriminate against anyone based on race, gender, age, or any other surface criteria. I do as a sort of trolley way, but in a way to bring people to talk about certain things or to engage in conversations. Doesn't necessarily mean I have those opinions, so we don't, even me, discriminate against. But I might use something that I know will trigger you in the way that we autistic people are irrationally triggered by certain things. So are you folks. And if I say a certain word or a certain concept, it's going to engage a dialogue or a reaction, which is often predictable by us being so pattern-oriented Asperger's folks. Don't live up to the demanding social expectations. Dang wrong, I don't. Don't have hidden agendas. That's 100% correct. Straightforward is the way. Clear, concise, forward. Let's all have the battle plans the way it should be. Don't play head games. Not first. Don't take advantage of others' weaknesses. Most Asperger's don't usually recognize hierarchies, like presidents and why we have an electoral college and other interesting, bizarre ways we go about things. To give someone superior status simply because that person is wealthy or has attained a high position in an organization. We're all just people. We're all just people. Look at all the people. I fucked up the line. Oh well. Have a good work ethic. Have a lot of passion when engaging activities that they like, which may translate to a talent for certain athletic pursuits. Or, as often said, both about cancers and Asperger's, an interest in the arts, movie, theater, comedy, creative stuff like that, playing instruments. Have a tendency to adhere to routines. Dun, dun, dun. Have above average intelligence. Remember what I told you the doctor said? I've never met an autistic person who wasn't intelligent. Have an acute sensitivity that supports creative talents. Have exceptional memories. Have extreme endurance, 100%. I'd even say in a way that I'm personally addicted to pain. I even thought about paying a person, like hiring a person and giving them all of my inadequacies to get stronger at them and have them use all of my trigger points and stuff against me so that you ultimately may endure even more in practice. Because in my opinion, people learn through pain and suffering and through repetitious behavior. We learn through repetition as humans. So if you go through enough experiences like watching horror movies growing up, for example, eventually you'll have a desensitization to the fear response that comes with horror movies, which has its pros and its cons. It means I don't react proper in a situation that I should be afraid, which is a sense that could save my life from danger. But it also means that I can make rational calculations to a degree from the lack of being so fearful. So, a little bit of mixed bag there. Have talents for swimming. Everybody rowing, running, bodybuilding, or other activities that require sustained physical effort. Have values that aren't shaped by financial, social, or political influences. Definitely. In fact, the bartering system was the way to go. Everybody had a job. Everything in the world had purpose. You could trade and you could go out and hone skills. Maybe it was the fact that autistic people might not have been so good at bartering, only having those certain skills. Not everybody interested in those skills. Now, but really think about that. A storyteller is a trait. Before movies and things existed and those kind of things back then, Someone who could help transport your mind to another place, a painter, a storyteller, was a very big job. I think the bartering system would have kept everybody employed, everything functional. You know, you just trade what you think it's worth versus what they think it's worth. The Reiki doctor might trade all the medicine he's given you and the verbal wisdom he's given you from life experiences. The walking shaman, in exchange just for something to eat or for a place to lay his head for the night, so he can continue to do that same 1 to 3 skills, almost autistic like fascination and obsession that he has elsewhere. But to him, that might be worth it. You only gave him a place to crash for the night and a small meal, but he gave you shit that will help you for the rest of your entire life plus medicine. But that might be a fair, equal trade to him. And the same for you. You might come to find it fair. So value isn't necessarily determined by money or assets. Loathe small talk 100% and trivialities, preferring instead to talk about significant things that will enhance their knowledge base. Make very good employees if able to control their pace and work within either a solitary or socially supportive environment. They pay attention to detail. Most Asperger's people stick to their positions even in the face of intense social pressure, tend to become proficient in the technological media required for lucrative employment in the information age, tend to prefer individual sports to team sports. And remember that isolation. Remember that a lack of social interest. Tend to prefer individual sports as to team sports. Damn, I called it, as there are no social demands, and they can exercise complete control. Remember the seminar of the woman with autism teaching people who teach autistic kids complete control over the activity. Who develop an interest in sports or fitness are likely to work at it every day. Remember that obsessive trait we talked about, often for long periods of time. To the exclusion of all else, I believe my words are, will not go along with the crowd if they know that something is wrong. You might say that an autistic person is your modern conspiracy theorist sometimes too, the woke folk or what have you, because it's harder for us simply because it sounds wise to do, or someone dressed in a suit and a tie speaking in a calm, clear, easy to understand voice to you, regurgitating facts for you. Just because it sounds wise to do doesn't necessarily mean that we will listen to it. Where's the real incentive? That you look, sound, and claim that it is wise to do X, Y, and Z, and that I'll get this result if I do so. But what of the data? Do I see you with the money and success and the tools? Are you a blind stranger? What of your credentials? So for someone to just give you the answer doesn't necessarily work for us. I want to know the mechanics, the technicalities. I've been described, remember, I do have autism. I have Asperger syndrome. I've been described as the Borg. Very, first I didn't want to agree with that. Kind of sounds pretty fucking insulting. It's like the evil scum of Star Trek that takes over all, just absorbs knowledge and sucks up every being they can, killing in the universe and making it work for them. But, look at how that just sounded out loud. Kind of close, really. A sponge sucking up information, more technical and reserved in nature, calculatory, right? 7 of 9 was a really good example, kind of. Even when it came to sex, when she wanted to explore some of those avenues and found out that someone else wanted it, and this was the mating ritual and how it's done, instead of all the extra elaborate crap, or just being blindly led by emotion, she, and that was quite attractive to me, just went for it. Pin her up against the wall, get aggressive with it. It's just not how it's done. You didn't expect that. Once all she knew is, oh, now we're doing the relationship thing. Now we're going down the human mating rituals and all the crap that you guys do here, and you're interested in doing it with me. So she was just going on a checklist in her mind of the things it means, like accomplishments in relationships. There's kind of a periodical table, if you will, of order of most events, and she just kind of went for all of those without the emotional understanding, right? That ebb and that flow, that interactive way, talking, thinking to get to the exit, which is the understanding or completion of a task or memory or knowledge, seems pretty mechanical. So first I didn't want to agree with the Borg thing, but it's actually pretty accurate. In fact, sometimes I've related to the medical hologram, the MH Mach 3 or whatever it was, and Star Trek Voyager in a similar way. In fact, I may come back to you guys in the future with some clips, but there was a particular episode where he basically modified his own program. Now, this is a hologram. This is a computer program. Okay, so it's a guy like Sophia the robot or something. You know, it's learning from the information given to it by people, and it was given a large body of information, mostly medical information, super technical stuff. Yeah, medicine, and very little bedside manner, but a little bit on how to deal with humans. Is it sounding autistic already? It gets even more interesting. So there, in this particular episode, this medical hologram doctor, after other episodes and things happened, was given permission to modify his own program. He didn't originally have that ability. And it was hopefully to teach him better bedside manner, make him more adaptable and able to do further functions. And a big reason for motivating why he was granted this ability was, what if something happens to the ship's captain? Maybe I can place fill and I have all these superior skills and ability to interface with the ship, that I might do a good job. And of course, being a computer program with all this advanced knowledge, it sounds logical at the time. So they granted him the ability to change his program and character and modify his own program instead of just being that same old way of doing things that the regular human interactors understand, right? Okay, so he's able to modify his program. So he decided to do some editing and download personalities of some of history's most famous and smart people in the world, some of the greatest philosophers, right? Like, for me, for example, downloading in my brain Socrates, Aristotle, Albert Einstein growing up. Those are muses, if you will. The people suit. I'll tell you about that one day. It's a thought experiment. So, in the show, he downloads all of that. Genghis Khan, though, is also one of those things, because historically he accomplished a lot, including kind of, I think it's something like 90% of all Asians can trace their lineage back to Genghis Khan. Okay, so, now, but he had a great military mind. And whatever we think about morality, it's interesting how much he accomplished. Now, interestingly enough, other people like Napoleon and Hitler, who also accomplished masterful, unbelievably a lot, regardless of which direction that a lot was. Both Napoleon and Hitler, fun fact, unrelated, we'll get right back, only had one testicle. So they had less testosterone and did all that. Look at all that. So humans are capable of a lot. Don't doubt with the autism. Now, where were we here? Because that part is so fun. So the medical hologram downloads all these historic personalities, including Genghis Khan, and it causes, much like in the human mind, much like for us, we're so smart, we've downloaded so many stories. Stories contradict other stories. The human brain is interesting. Remember, it doesn't do what's smart, it does what's familiar. We also know that if I showed you an apple and hooked your brain up and read its waves, that it thinks it's eating one. It doesn't know the difference between seeing an apple, right, and eating the apple. The same parts of your brain light up that would, if I were to give you a bite of it, than if I were to take you a picture of it. So, in knowing that, the subconscious mind, which is a sum of the many stories we tell ourselves as we learn in yoga, what we do on a daily basis defines us, might get a little bit befuddled, create neural pathways and things that go wrong. So in the case of the hologram, for example, he became a person with split personality disorder over time who had no idea he was going in and out of those split personas because he added those extra personas. And all those personas granted him more information and wisdom on how to deal with them when he was his own character, so to speak. He wasn't always. Sometimes he's going into those compartmentalized regions or being different characters. He originally absorbed all this, and it caused him a lot of sort of problems. It's a lot like how Asperger's works. Being a shapeshifter of sorts, using pre-programmed speech and patterns that may or may not have worked before to try to figure out how to get to the destination. Being the me it takes to kind of get there. So I thought he worked as a great representation. Now, I'm afraid that's all I have for you today, folks, but I hope you greatly enjoyed this presentation. My name is Kevin Chaos, bitshoot.com/KTV, youtube.com/C/Kevin La Liberty. That's LALIBERTE. It's my main YouTube channel. BitChute will host every KTV episode, which is often highly controversial and inappropriate due to words or autism, humor, we touch on a lot of edge-pushing stuff, but some of them might make it to YouTube, so be sure to check out each place, because every place has its own sort of area of what I highlight and make fun. For example, every Thursday, we will have some sort of, usually, I got a lot to juggle here, But usually we have a live stream or me playing video games and or a new music video. And I try to make music videos off of movies and cartoons for songs that never had a music video, preferably, or idiosyncrasies. Remember that word popping out in that list? Juxtapositional humor and things that might make it more interesting if it did originally have a music video. So we got lots of cool stuff on the YouTube channel as well. You can check out a playlist over there, actually called KTV, before I had the concept for the show. Songs like Hobson's song "I'm Not Crazy" to Mr. or Mrs. Garrison, Mr. Twig, Mr. Hat, etc., to discuss kind of with saying without saying gender dysphoria, right? Or gender dysmorphia. To Maybe I'm Just Blind from Three Doors Down, to Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender animated cartoon. Most recently, we uploaded, by we of course I mean me, but that's how YouTubers talk anyway. I think everybody's a them or a they when they're on YouTube, huh? Most recently, we uploaded an American Horror Story, and I think I did pretty decent considering I didn't have to put a whole lot into this. It came out really nice. American Horror Story is like 7 minutes almost long of a song. A band called Lucifer's Children. So you can check out a music video for that as well. Very awesome stuff if you're into the peculiar or the dark. And lots of other projects on there. In the future, we'll have all kinds of things coming. We're Devil News will be a segment on the show as well. It was originally going to be its own program. In the future, you'll be able to call in, text in, Skype in, and Discord in with your questions and what have you, and we'll be able to address each of those things as we go along in these topics live. So, and the main website, as you can see at the top of the page here, is kevinsportal.com. So there's always going to be links to anything relevant or interesting. KTV, kevinsportal.com, a portal to all things Kevin. No matter what I do, no matter distracted or focused I am, you're going to have links to all of it, and we're going to see what we can do. Now, the goal, if you read kevinsportal.com's manifesto, what it is that I hope to accomplish ultimately is raising mental health awareness, love for the strange, love for the difference, appreciation for all walks of life, and hopefully showcasing in the future other people with these disorders and strange attributes as well, to kind of create a positive circus, if you will, of not the physically, but the mentally different, from the person with his hand stuck to his chest to the speech impediment beatboxer. I mean, we've got some really cool concepts and ideas, and I want to make sure that everybody out there kind of gets their chance to shine, gets their chance to be appreciated, and more importantly, understood instead of ridiculed. Because you're going to come to find out by the end of all of my experiments, movies, documentaries, shows, and programs here, you're going to come to find out a lot of those people you judged were probably actually not only happier than you were, but more skilled than you could actually ever hope to be. That things like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, means that they stay one place longer. They obsess, so they might be smarter with certain topics, right? That things like ADHD means that although limiting their ability to singular task, they might be able to multitask extremely well. So at a moderate pace, get a lot more done in the day than you. You might come to find out that someone with bipolar disorder, being described as having manic, that is, fast or excessive, speedy emotions, or depressive, manic depression is bipolar for short, depressive, slowed down, sad, you might come to find out that that person, someone diagnosed with bipolar, is actually extremely familiar, therefore, with emotion, and is one of your best friends then, because that's the person you're going to all the time for advice, and who always has some sort of insight or context to put into perspective what you need to be told, how to console you, how to help you get to the next page there. You might come to find out that bipolar was as much of a blessing, therefore, then, as it was a detriment. You might come to find out that anxiety has its own blessing, because it means it's going to be more attentive to detail. It means that person has to try 3, 4, 5, 10 times as hard to do a simple thing as you do and still keep it all together, making them that much more disciplined, structured, and studied in the background of their ways of going about things. Notice a fascination. Notice a theme here. You may find out that Someone with schizophrenia, while their language and ways of going about describing things may sound like a bad acid trip, but when you really start to understand the modality, much like the autistic person, the way that they use the words, right? When they use those words. I learned in third grade, if you didn't understand something, listen to the surrounding sentences and you might be able to define a word without having to go grab the dictionary. Well, the same is true. Now, if you listen long enough to people with schizophrenia, you may actually find that they have a great understanding of the spiritual, that is to say, subconscious and emotional world, that they greatly understand the subjective world. And they might communicate a little differently, but they're aware, much like the autistic person, of excessive amounts of supportive data. They just express it in a very strange tone, and to them it might actually come off as sound and sights. But the overall message and information that they're giving you is actually very real and filled with a lot of extra details that wouldn't normally be perceivable to a person, because a schizophrenic has a sort of unique, uncanny ability, whether wrong or right, it depends on the person and the subject, to tie seemingly invisible threads to everything they focus on and force it to support their main narrative. Thus, if the connections are genuine, they actually end up with a lot more pattern recognition and understanding on a topic than the average person. The way that they go about explaining it to you sounds off the wall. The CIA's got like fucking satellites in my teeth, but they might be talking overall or even jokingly about the sort of echo chamber of their mind and collecting information throughout the day and summarize it, which they often do in terms of technology. So there's like lots of interesting ways that you could approach this as the same person to slow down. You're going to find that there are benefits to every disease, and some of your best friends are filled with this kind of stuff. So hopefully by the end of the journey, my time here on Earth as Kevin Francis Liberty Jr. will enlighten some people and help share love and understanding of the great variety of life that we have. I'm going to end here to quote the Empire in Brooklyn. If every day is a sunny day, what's a sunny day? Evil is good. Evil and good, they walk hand in hand. Take Brother Brown, for example. Brother Brown was down on Bush Gavin last night with a $2 hoe. See, that's evil. When you tell your wife, I'm going to go to see Mama, then you take yourself down to Bush Gavin and get yourself a $2 hoe. That's evil. But Brother Brown had a good time with that $2 hoe. See? Evil and good, they walk hand in hand. Evil is good. Now, the real message there, though, is duality. Not the one, but two. A story don't have one side, but it got two sides. Duality. And when you can understand that kind of thing, you learn to kind of appreciate all sorts of contrasted things, even things you don't particularly appreciate. Believe in yourself, like different religions. The ones exactly opposite to you, for example, give credence to yours. Without the contrast, one wouldn't know the other. If every day is a sunny day, what's a sunny day? Without the moon, you wouldn't know. There would be no concept of there being a day without something to contrast it, without light to contrast and dark, etc. So there's a unique level of appreciation among us. Anyway, we can't have this be infinitely long. Enjoy. I'm Kevin Chaos, kevinsportal.com, bitshoot.com/KTV. So many things coming. We also, if you have an Android, Rap Fame. Make a lot of freestyles and goofy shit up there. And soon we'll be doing daily. Getting back into that after my short leave here. Daily songs. That's right. Daily songs. I used to be actually doing that on Rap Fame, which I have over 1,500 subscribers on. But we're going to be doing that on YouTube and maybe on both. So you're going to have swamped a lot of material. I don't get paid for any of this stuff. But this is the kind of thing I love doing anyway. Educating people on different things that I understand or have struggled with that they might understand quicker or struggle less. Building entertainment and comedy, making people smile and laugh. And technology and language. Those are my obsessions. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun here today. Be sure to check out the website and check out other things that you might be interested in, other projects and directions there. If you need to contact me, you can contact me through text at 757-505-0104. You can contact me on Facebook at facebook.com/KevinChaosOfficial. You can find other contact methods for me at kevinsportal.com. Have a lovely day, or evening, or night, or what have you, depending on your insomnia level too. You see the fun I'm good, better at communication than a lot of people with Asperger's. It should be noted. Very high functioning. But if we were to be as technical as we could think, we'd be here a while. All right, enjoy yourselves, folks. Peace be with you, if you want peace. War be with those who want war. Adios.
I'm gonna leave you anyway. I'm gonna leave you anyway. I'm gonna leave you anyway. You're gonna